Sup, my dudes. Hey, boys, I just want to let you know I appreciate everybody that participated in that little community tab poll that I did yesterday. That was kind of sick. Basically went in there and posted on my community tab asking the question, what kind of videos do you guys like better? And I had a bunch of options on there like MX Simulator, MX Bikes, arcade motocross games, real life videos, other kind of games. And interestingly enough, it was like 40% voted for MX Bikes, and then it was split between, like MX Simulator and arcade games was at like 20 or 30%, and then real life videos was at like 6%, and other kind of games videos was at like 2% or something like that. So I appreciate everybody that participated in that. I'm definitely going to take that into consideration with making future videos, and I'm also going to start posting on that community tab a lot more, so that'll be really cool. But yeah, we got some MX Bikes videos on the way, MX Sim videos on the way, just trying to kind of get all I can out of this MXGP 2020 shit here before it completely disappears, right? Before it's pretty much like just totally yesterday's news. I feel like it already kind of is, but the fact that MXGP 2020 came out so much later than the MXGP games normally do, it's going to kind of give it the vibe where it feels like we just basically skipped MXGP 2020 and went straight to Supercross 4 in a sense, right? Especially once Supercross 4 actually comes all the way out. I think it's really going to feel like that. Like when Supercross 4 comes out, I don't think you're going to be seeing anything else on MXGP 2020 as far as like people making content on it and stuff like that, even though it only came out like 2 months ago, right? So, but anyways, this is an interesting little track right here. I've already kind of forgot the name of it here, but you guys will know this track. I'll go back to it here in a second. We'll look at the name of it. But this right here, I think, is by far the best track in MXGP 2020 for a couple different reasons here. But I think the biggest thing about this track right here, and I'm talking about the default tracks in the game, the default actual MXGP replica tracks made by the developer. I'm not talking about custom tracks or the compound tracks or anything like that, right? Just talking about the standard MXGP tracks in the game. This one right here, to me, one humongous thing about it is this is pretty much the one and only track in this entire game where I feel like the pre-made ruts are actually doing something on the track. I'm not going to say they're doing a lot on the track, but at least it feels like they're doing a smidgen of something, right? So a lot of times with these milestone games, a lot of these previous milestone games, they'll make it look like there's all these little ruts on the track and shit, right? They'll make it look like this super pre-made rutty, gnarly ass motocross track, but the fact of the matter is when you actually get on it, it's just not really like that, right? A lot of you guys know what I'm talking about too, where it'll feel more just like basically a flat track. You just kind of push through all the ruts and it doesn't really feel anything like what it usually looks like, right? But this track in particular, for whatever reason, the pre-made ruts on this track actually do somewhat kind of steer the bike a little bit, especially the ones that... I'm going to go off the track here real quick. Alrighty then, boys. I've rode like a total of 5 laps on this track, so you know how that is. But yeah, this track, for whatever reason, these pre-made ruts on this one in particular, I don't know if it's a combination of the way the traction is, the type of the dirt on this track in particular, or what. I don't know what the deal is exactly, why it does that on this track in particular, but not really on any of the other tracks. This one right here is like one of those tracks that this would have been the first track I would have showed in the trailer of the gameplay of this game. Not only does this track look like more, pre-made ruts and stuff like that, but it also, somewhat does create at least a smidgen of actual physical rut filling on the track. Now, like I said, don't run wild with that opinion. Don't, think I'm saying, oh, Spencer, I told you there was pre-made. Oh, there you go, dude. Dude, there's pre-made in MXGP 2020. No. Okay, this is singling out one track right here. This is the most of the most example that you're going to find as far as any kind of pre-made in this entire game. And plus, this game does not have terrain deformation in it at all. I just recently made a video on that, right? This game does not have terrain deformation in it whatsoever. They just totally stripped that out. So, the fact that there's just one track in this game where it feels like there is a smidgen of a pre-made rut filling on it is not really saying a whole lot. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I expected at least every track in this game to at least have this much of a pre-made rut filling on it, right? This feels more like the kind of on track that I would have expected from all the tracks on MXGP 2020. This track still doesn't really have any roughness, and it still doesn't quite have, like I'm saying, it's still not really like grabbable ruts. It's still not like what you'd find on a, like a Reflex Red Bud track or anything even close to that, or like a Reflex track that actually has, or like a MX Sim track that actually has pre-made on it and shit, like proper pre-made ruts on it. It's still nothing to that. But for a milestone MXGP game, this is probably the most pre-made type vibe, pre-made ruddy feeling that we've ever had on any other track in any other MXGP game out there. So for that one reason only, and just the fact of that kind of darker vibe dirt color mixed with the lighter gray color, I don't know, there's just something about this track that I just feel like this one in particular has kind of got a mix of that water pond, a little bit wetter, slicker, muddier areas on the track mixed with the more standard brownie mix dirt other areas of the track. I just like the overall aesthetic of this track as a whole. I feel like it's one of the best graphical looking tracks in this entire game, and it's one of the best as far as the pre-made rut filling tracks in the entire game. I think another big reason for that is especially in some of these berms, I feel like they really got the berms built up on this track as well, and that in some of these corners the pre-made rut kind of goes into the berm, right? It kind of follows into the berm, so I feel like that's what kind of can make the bike get a little upset when you're really railing around some of these outside berms, which is what you want. You want the bike to kind of get upset when you go into a corner and you're just wide ass open going through a outside berm. That shouldn't be a super smooth experience. There should be some feedback on the bike when you do that. On a rough MXGP motocross track, you should have some feedback when you're trying to rail around the track. You should have a feeling of the ruts kind of trying to lead your bike in different directions than what you intended, and because that makes you actually feel the ruts and feel the pre-made of the track, and it gets you away from that feeling like you're just on basically playing a street bike game, but on dirt, you know what I mean? It kind of it makes you feel more like an actual motocross track. That was that weird ass, you ever done that where you turn in a corner on these milestone games and you go up a jump face while you're turning? So you're turning both your thumbsticks kind of opposite directions in a sense because you're trying to balance yourself, but then it does one of those weird ass milestone scrubs over the jump and you can't do anything about it, and the bike just is totally sideways when you go off a 2-foot double. That's always a good time. But yeah, I just wanted to go in here and show this track off. This is the best example of this is the best looking, best example of any kind of pre-made or anything like that with MXGP 2020, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. This is the best one right here, and this is certainly, I don't think, the biggest jump track in this game. You don't have a ton of jump fun factor or anything like that on this track. I'm gonna do a little grinding, baby, grind on me. I would have lived right there if it'll let me come back on the track. You do have this uphill triple right here, which is still, as you could see, I come up short on that, as worse as you possibly could, and the bike's just acting like I barely even landed off of anything. There is just not enough of that like actual airtime coming up, like these potential dangerous jumps where you could possibly, you know, feeling like they're kind of scary, like, oh my God, if I try to go for that quad or if I try to go for that big uphill triple, if I come up short, I'm going to pop off the bike. Like, this game just doesn't have any of that kind of jump, skill gap, fun factor, fear. It just doesn't have any of that. And it certainly doesn't really have that on this track right here. I mean, this is not like the worst jump track in the game, but I wouldn't call this the best jump track in the game either, right? It's kind of somewhere in the middle as far as the jumps goes, but I just feel like having that somewhat of that pre-made ruddy feeling, this is just like it's kind of like an amped up version of your standard kind of pre-made that you normally would get in these milestone games, where it's pretty much normally always 100% visual. This is like, you know, 80% visual, 20% physically filling it on the track. Maybe even more like 90% visual, 10% filling it on the track. But when you compare it to the other tracks in this game, that's what makes it feel more like there's, you know, there's actually something rut on the track that you can actually feel. Now, I'm not saying it's a lot, like I'm saying, but still, compared to the other tracks in this game, I feel like that's the one thing that kind of makes this track feel a little different, is the fact that the little inside rut right there, this is the one track in this game where the pre-made on the terrain itself does have some kind of a feeling to it. You're not going to really dip and dive in these individual ruts, and like I say, there's no terrain deformation in this game, so when you compare it to other games, it still is very, very basic, but when you compare it to the other tracks in this game, it's, you know, probably the most that you have compared to any other track in the entire game. So but this is kind of like, you know, I wouldn't have been so like mad about this game had every track in this game at least had this much of a pre-made ruddy feeling to it. You know what I'm saying? Had every track in this game had a little bit more of this kind of a feeling to it, I wouldn't have been as harsh on the game, right? It's kind of what I'm getting at here. Obviously, the jump scaling and everything like that could have been bigger on this track, and they certainly could have had some corners where they actually built up 3 or 4 ruts in a corner where you could actually get into them. If they'd have done that, this track would have been fucking solid right here. But for this game itself, I think this is certainly the best example of like the most pre-made that you're going to find on any kind of track, the most kind of like actual ruddy feeling that you're going to find on any of the other tracks in the game. And it's got a very, very high res, you know, very realistic looking ground texture to it and everything. So, you know, it's one of the best looking tracks in my opinion as far as the on-track dirt itself. And overall, I love that feeling of that, having some bigger berms in the corners and having these little ruts, like feeling like they go into the berm a little bit. And just this track overall just feels like it's got some, almost like a slight little micro roughness over some of the track too. It's not braking bumps by any stretch of the imagination, right? I'm not talking about, oh, they got braking bumps, or oh, now they finally got pre-made ruts. It's not like that. It's like a just, at least there's some kind of a feeling to it, you know? At least it feels like there's some kind of a smidgen of little bit of roughness around the track, a little bit of a rut filling on the track. At least there's a little bit of that on this track compared to, you know, pretty much every other track in this game doesn't really have that kind of feeling at all. Just has that more flat, smooth, blow through all the ruts like they're not even there. And you still do that to some extent on this track. Like I say, it's not like there's sturdy ruts that's going to grab you like in Reflex or MX Sim, you know, pre-made tracks, or, you know, it's definitely not like the braking bumps of a Reflex track or anything like that. But for Milestone, like, this is what I would call decent for milestone, this track right here is decent. So if that just kind of gives you an idea of how the rest of this game is, you know, the best track, the absolute best track in this game, as far as all that kind of stuff, I just call decent, right? They all look good. They're all, you know, that next graphical level, so they all kind of have that better look to them, but I think a lot of the other tracks in this game just kind of go down that same... Looks like there's ruts everywhere, and there's not really a pre-made rough or rutty filling at all. It just looks like it's like that, you know. It's kind of how pretty much all the other tracks are in this game. They just graphically look better, and that's really the only thing about it. There's a couple of jumps like that one right there where you kind of got to hit the outside and carry a little bit of speed to jump all the way down. But even if you come up short on anything on this track or over jump anything on this track, dude, it is not any kind of real jump skill gap at all. The rollers or ruts or whatever you want to call that shit right there, that's no skill gap at all to that, right? There still really is no skill gap to this track, even though this is probably the best track in the entire game as far as a rough or any sort of a rough or rutty filling to it. It still doesn't really have any kind of skill gap to it, man. It just really doesn't. Like, it's not the obstacles themselves just feel like they're just there. You know, it doesn't really feel like an actual obstacle. It actually feels like you're more so riding on a track that doesn't really have any obstacles, but they're just there. Like, I don't know any other way to explain that, but it's not like, oh shit, there's that big ass triple, I better really, you know, hammer it around the outside, and if I come up short, I might pop off the bike. You know, it's not like, oh shit, there's that gnarly ass roller section, I might flip over if I don't, you know, lean on the bike properly or what. There's just none of that, dog. There's none of that. Absolutely, demortally none of that. So, but I at least wanted to come in here and kind of show this track and just explain why I feel like this is the, you know, the best track in the game and shit. But yeah, either way, hope you guys enjoy all these videos, and we're about to say goodbye to MXGP 2020 here, so I hope you guys have enjoyed some of this. But this was just an eye candy next gen game. That's all this really was. So hopefully they can get their shit together with the next MXGP game, because in a nutshell, that is all this game really is, dude. I mean, there's a lot of you very, very casual motocross gaming fans that, you know, didn't necessarily have a problem with this game or didn't mind this game, which is fine. That's not a big deal. But when you compare this to the gameplay of everything else, even just comparing this to the skill gap in the gameplay of Supercross 3, like, yeah, this is better graphics than Supercross 3, so it tricks your mind up into thinking the game is actually better, but in all reality, like, the skill gap of this game and the speed of this game and everything about the actual gameplay itself is just not on the level that it should be for a MXGP game in 2020, you know? No terrain deformation, no cloudy or wet track weather condition mode, no ghost in time trial, only one singular, very, very basic free ride compound that doesn't really have any bigger jumps on it like you would have found in Supercross 2 or Supercross 3. It's just this bizarre feeling of like you can barely get off of the ground in this game. Very, very weird, small, one-to-one scaling, small jump sizes, slow, high friction to the dirt. There's a lot of negatives to this game. There really is. There's a lot of things that you just expected to have been better. It just seems like every bit of their time and effort was put into making this game look better and making it this whole next-gen thing, but everything else just basically got put on the back burner, man. It really, really did. But to a lot of casual motocross gamers, they don't understand all of the ins and outs when you compare these games to other motocross games and all that, you know. A lot of people like graphics is one of the most important things, and it's not for me personally, but there is a lot of people that, like, if you just make a game look better, look more like next gen or whatever, they're going to automatically think that game is better just because it looks better, you know, and they don't really play a lot of these motocross games are a lot more casual, so this to them is like, not that bad, But in all reality, when you're really a, more of a hardcore motocross gaming fan, this shit right here is just more of the same. It's more of the same, and if you can look past the graphics, you will realize all of the pitfalls of the gameplay of this game right here when you compare it to, previous milestone games. There's no doubt about that, but either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.